everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Outside Insider podcast here on Philly Sports Network with myself, Liam Jenkins. You know the score by now. All things Eagles related, wrapped up into a nice box, discounted 20%, and sold to you by a British guy who's overly enthusiastic, sometimes sarcastic, and has a very high-pitched voice. If you're new around here and not yet subscribed to the show, thank you for taking time out of your day to listen to this podcast. If you do this regularly, you're the real MVP. The soppy speech is coming, you know how this show goes. But if you're not subscribed, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Spreaker, Google Play, YouTube, and all other good podcasty platforms. So if you are listening to this, you're not subscribed, it would mean a lot if you could just hit that button, maybe leave a nice review if you'd be so kind, that would be great. But, Eagles, a week, news, what have we got to talk about? I feel like I may or may not have accidentally drafted myself out. Like, there is only so much more NFL draft content I can talk about before I implode. It has been a roller coaster 7 days, but luckily for us, Howie Roseman comes in the clutch and delivers a lethal blow to the rest of the NFL. Because on Friday morning, he goes out and acknowledges the fact that Eagles fans were a little bit displeased that the team hadn't addressed the linebacker position. Sort of like if you go shopping as a kid with a parent and you're promised to go to a toy shop and you don't go to that toy shop. It doesn't matter what Burger King you have. It doesn't matter what new jeans you get. If you don't get a chance to look at, I was going to say Thunderbirds, but that's a very British thing. So Power Rangers, we'll go with that. You're a bit annoyed. So Roseman, being the parent that he is, surprised his kids. He went, no, kids, you go to the car. You wait, okay? Don't you go back with your mum. I'll go back into the shopping centre and I'll pick you up. And he comes out with a shiny new Red Ranger just for that kid. Made his day. Made his entire weekend. Because on Friday morning, the Philadelphia Eagles announced the signing of former Redskins linebacker 29-year-old Zay Brown on a $3 million deal over 1 year. Now, the best part is that deal is worth $1.5 million guaranteed with a $400,000 signing bonus. That's pretty good considering the caliber of player that Zay Brown is. For context, just to show you how dominant Howie Roseman is in every phase of life. I mean, I would hate to be on the opposite end of the spectrum here. Like, imagine being an opponent team. Imagine being the next door neighbour of Howie Roseman that accidentally plays music too loud past 10 p.m. It's not a battle you're gonna win. It's just not. So Washington originally gave Zay Brown a 3-year deal worth $24 million. $10 million of that was guaranteed. You can't blame him. You really, really can't blame Washington for doing that. Brown was an incredible talent. He was coming off of the back of 2 100-plus tackle seasons. All-Pro, Pro Bowler. What more could you want from Zay Brown? Then they realised, well, we kind of can't keep him around. We need to save some money. So they cut him in 2018 after that season because they just need some extra room. You know, they're running out of space. They have to get rid of him. They'd rather build through the draft. And to put that into perspective, Zay Brown went on 106.7 The Fan, which I assume is a radio station and not an actual fan blowing cold air. The only thing this fan was blowing was smoke, let me tell you. Zay Brown was cut 1 year later. It wasn't even like a big hit. The Eagles got rid of Timmy Jernigan the first time because he was going to cost them like $11 million against the cap. Do you know how much Zay Brown was going to cost the Redskins? $3 million. $3 million. It's not even like he had a monumental cap. $3 million. That's tiddlywinks. So Brown went on the Fan to blow the smoke and said, I see why our organisation is disrespected. We stan a king, ladies and gentlemen. Howie Roseman sniffs out blood on the water. He understands what's going on. And he kind of just analyzes and says, hey, well, do you know what? The dead cap the Redskins had was $3 million. I think he actually cost them $5.7 million against the cap, I believe. And he goes, why is no one signing this man? The truth is, I don't really know. Bizarrely, and this is very bizarre, okay, Zay Brown had 96 tackles last year, which is lower than the 127 he had the year before, and obviously close to half of what we saw from the 149 he had in his lone season with Buffalo, and 4 sacks that campaign as well. But Zach Brown, during that 2018 campaign, had 10 games where he had an oblique injury. Now, I'm not a doctor. In fact, I know very little of basic human anatomy. So I had to Google what an oblique is and where it is on the human body. Because outside of ACLs and MCLs and LCLs and AC joints and shoulder, like the common ones, I'm not very knowledgeable. So I did some research. And the oblique muscles are either side. Just do me a favour. Put your hands on your hips. Imagine being punched there and it going purple and then having to play a football game with it as a linebacker for 10 weeks. Yeah. I am a bit of a wuss, in all fairness. I'm not good with pain. You're talking to the guy that got thrown in skips at school and pretty much beaten up every day of his life. However, I couldn't imagine playing a football game running around with bruised ribs or an oblique. That sounds terrifying. And Brown said in an interview with the Redskins that it made him at times be unable to breathe. Imagine an injury that painful where the simple motion of, I don't know what the muscle is, maybe a pancreas? I was going to say the placenta, but that's certainly not it. So the pancreas, or whatever it is that makes you breathe along with your lungs, so that lifts up, that hurts and strains the oblique. That is awful. And somehow this guy, through 10 weeks, still posted 96 tackles, still had 2 quarterback hits, and not only that, if we look at any of his statistics, or I know there are a lot of the Pro Football Focus hive out there nowadays, the man ranks as an elite linebacker at every facet of the game. He can play all 3 positions, he's a highly productive guy, he's got 372 tackles in the last 3 years, and that, believe it or not, is second only to Bobby Wagner. Of all linebackers. In fact, no, the entire NFL, of any player. Not even Jalen Mills has that many. And he had 7. I'm kidding. But in 74 career starts, he's had 632 tackles, 57 for a loss, 32 QB hits, 20 passes defensed, 17.5 sacks, are you bored yet? 7 interceptions, and 6 forced fumbles. Now, I don't think the guy's an elite pass coverage linebacker. He's not going to replace what Jordan Hicks was in that regard. But this is someone that is a stout run defender. He was the 3rd best off-the-ball linebacker according to Pro Football Focus. And if you do want to go into the coverage aspects anyway, he allowed receptions of 17.9% of targets, an average of 8.1 yards per reception, quarterback rating of 87.4 when targeted. All of those rank inside the top 20. There is no way this is a bad move. So how did he slip through the cracks? I genuinely feel as though the linebacker market was always a strange one. Always a bit of a weird one this time around. Purely because there were some really big names that were always going to dictate the market around his sort of age range as well. CJ Mosley obviously headed proceedings. He now goes to the New York Jets on a monumental deal. Anthony Barr signed a short-term deal with an average of, I think, around $12 million. Zadarius Smith, again, another interesting option. Kwon Alexander stays as one of the more, I would say, higher upside linebackers in this modern NFL era thing. At 25 years old, earning $54 million. If you just want inside linebackers, obviously Jordan Hicks sets quite the boundary himself. He's 27 years old. He now goes to the Cardinals on a 4-year deal worth $34 million. KJ Wright ends up staying in Seattle. That's a 30-year-old guy. Mark Barron signs a deal. And all of a sudden, those numbers start slowly creeping down. And there's only so much cake to go around. Clay Matthews, 33 years old. Slightly older linebacker. He ends up with a new deal. Jake Ryan goes to Jacksonville. That was some more competition there. LJ Fort, another inside linebacker, as we know, he just goes, I want to play for a team that is covered by an LJ. So here he comes to the Eagles. 3-year deal, $5.5 million, average of 1.9 a year. So it's an odd one, because you never really knew exactly what the market was going to be for Zach Brown. He was one of these linebackers that he's 29, so that long-term deal, that 4 to 5 year deal for his production, you're not going to get, because teams don't want to overcommit. And especially coming off what I would call an injury-plagued year, it is difficult. And you've got to understand that from a general manager perspective, when you're looking at the linebackers available, you're just going to turn to the draft. because they're all going to be cheaper. You look at what someone like Leighton Van Der Esch could do, what Jordan Hicks did during his short time in the league with the Eagles after being drafted there. You look for youth. Guys like Blake Cashman. You had Devin Bush, Devin White, two huge Devins, more than anything else. But this is a strong linebacker class. So why would you pay for that much? It was an odd one. So Zay Brown fell through the cracks. And after Washington overpaid, they bit early last offseason to make sure that they withstood the market, that they get their guy. Now they end up losing him to save $5 million, roughly. And Howie Roseman goes, yeah, well, we'll just give you 3, but we'll guarantee 1.5 mil. It's a baller move. There is no way you can dislike this. Now, I wouldn't keep him out there on passing down straight away, unless he proves something otherwise in training camp and preseason. But I think the Eagles have a nice balance now. You've got Paul Warrilow, who I would say is a bit more of a prominent run stopper as well. You've then, of course, now got this young man, who is going to just tear everything up in front of him, penetrate the backfield like there's no tomorrow. And then, of course, you've got LJ Fort. So it's a really, really interesting scenario. Because all of a sudden now the Eagles are inundated with linebacker depth. That the other spot is still inhabited by Kamuguji Hill and Nate Jerry. And again, as we've referenced on other podcasts and other videos and articles and every other form of media that we now do at Philly Sports Network, that the Eagles are leaning more and more towards nickel and dime packages, or big nickel, or big dime, or little nickel, whatever you want to call them. Where only 2 linebackers are on the field, and Malcolm Jenkins, is filling that third role. Now this keeps, 1, a fresh depth of linebackers quite healthy, especially for special teams. You add in LJ Fort, you can understand that mentality. And 2, flexibility to bend to any situation. You know Nigel Bradham's going to captain this defense. I think his pass coverage certainly dipped last year. But against the run, relentless. Meanwhile, interestingly enough, Zay Brown had his pass coverage go up quite a lot. It was quite worrying in 2017. And last year, just seemed to rise up. He was far more efficient, dropping back into zonal schemes. I mean, obviously, he's been an inside linebacker in a 3-4 scheme for quite some time. It'd be interesting to see how he adapts to a 4-3, but he's certainly capable of playing. I think his pass coverage got better. I'm going to wait till a full film room to give a verdict on it, but it improved, and I think every metric you can look at certainly backs that sentiment up. So now the Eagles have gone from a position of, we really need a linebacker, with me trying to swat the swords away and going, it's okay, big nickel, big dime, everything's okay, don't worry, don't panic. So all of a sudden, everyone just suddenly realising, oh, actually that's pretty good. And the biggest takeaway for me is that LJ Fort, who is here for 3 years, will have the ability to learn and to grow under a veteran in Zay Brown, who's widely regarded as a big locker room leader that leaves his player on the field. He was revered by the Bills. He was revered by the Titans as a big locker room guy. I think this is huge for his development. Absolutely huge. The Philadelphia Eagles have become a team where they like signing free agents and then letting the youth develop. Take a look, if you want no finer example than LeGarrette Blount. Take a look at what they did at wide receiver with Alshon Jeffrey. Take a look at what they did on the defensive side of the ball. Timmy Jernigan, the first time round, not the third contract that he's had with the team. Nigel Bradham, Rodney McLeod. They shore up Lane Johnson cornerstone with big contracts. And they may not be signing one and done guys, but Patrick Robinson was. The finest example of all. Signs a 1-year deal, balls out, the circumstance was right. And then up steps, well, after much deliberation and injury, Cravon LeBlanc. And that's obviously a discussion for another day, but that same mentality can apply at defensive end. Look at Chris Long. He will now leave behind Vinny Curry, who's going to step up to his role, Josh Sweat, Joe Ostman, and obviously now Sharif Miller. You can apply that to even maybe, if you want to push it, Alshon Jeffrey, 29 years old, he's not getting any younger. Going to be costing the Eagles a lot of money. If he makes it to the end of his contract deal, by that time, you're going to have one more year out of Arcega-Whiteside with a very similar skill set, built in a very similar vein, and then the idea to pick up a 5th-year option, and then an extension. the Eagles have their future number one receiver for life after Olshon. Someone that will divert attention, someone that will draw the gaze of safeties, opening up the middle of the field, opening up the run game. It's the same principle. Do not overlook that at all. I think this is absolutely huge for LJ Fort, someone that impressed me as a Pittsburgh Steeler. That I feel really, if you look back at his play, some of the games that he had, again, I want to do like a big film room on this, but he had 306 snaps last year. He had 48 tackles after having 11 in 2017. That's a big jump. A big jump. He was far more active on defense. Played a couple more roles. Was able to come down and match up against tight ends to pick up running backs. This is big for his development. As someone that was a real asset for Pittsburgh's run defense last year, he's now going to learn from Zay Brown, who is a zippier sideline-to-sideline guy with those veteran instincts. Absolutely monumental. So Howie Roseman, you cannot praise enough. You cannot praise enough for the work that he's done. And if you want more sentiment to that, his entire off-season haul list is basically an X-rated cast. It's like when, you get to the end of an adult film and you see I don't know what adult films do that, to be honest, where you see the actors and actresses at the end. But just have a look. Not an adult film, I meant, Howie. If we were to take the draft and the free agents and the re-signings, you get a pair of defensive tackles in Timmy Jernigan and Malik Jackson. I think that's a starting tandem anywhere in the NFL. Anywhere in the NFL. One of those will be a rotational piece. Vinny Curry, Brandon Graham. Now that's just restoring the old 2017 Power Rangers squad, which seems to be a theme today. But behind them you've got obviously Barnett, as we mentioned Josh Sweat, as we mentioned Joe Osman, as we mentioned Sharif Miller. Big time move for the Eagles, shores up the depth. Linebacker, Zay Brown, LJ Fort. That's as good a depth as you could ever ask for. Cornerback, Ronald Darby. We won't touch on that today. Running back, Miles Sanders, Jordan Howard. Need I say more? Don't get flustered just yet. We've still got the encore. Offensive tackle, Andre Dillard. Wide receivers, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, Deshaun Jackson. Oh, and Charles Johnson. And a quarterback in Clayton Thorson. I don't really know what there is to dislike. This was a very quiet... There were no big ball signings. There was no star. There was no C.J. Mosley. There was no Antonio Brown. There was no Le'Veon Bell. There was no drama. But Howie found a way to make it work again and again and again. There's a saying that a wise man once told me, a man you'll be very familiar with, who shall remain nameless, and if he's listening to this, I bid you a big shout out and a nice handshake. He told me that the emptiest cans make the most noise when you kick them. I think if you look around the NFL, the teams that were really trying to make noise, the players that were really trying to make their case on social media, that were constant, in your ear, in your face, on the television, the Eagles stayed away. They went under the radar. They let their methods, they let their scouting team, they let their coaching staff, they let the front office do the talking, and they come away with a draft haul and a free agency haul and an off-season haul that you can say is among the best in the league in terms of value, in terms of longevity, and in terms of, I guess, fit for the culture and the scheme. This was a big off-season for Howie Roseman, and I still don't understand how he does it. The aggression to go up and get his guy, the trust that he has in the front office, the belief that he has in the coaching staff, is what dreams are made of if you're an Eagles fan. There's no other way of looking at it. Howie Roseman's ability to wade into an off-season, judge the talent, not jump too hastily, not splash the cash, focus first on internal matters. I mean, we even missed getting a tender on Nate Sudfeld. That's probably one of the most impactful moves. They navigated the Nick Foles, I would say situation. It's more of a heartbreak, but very gracefully. And again, that ended the way that I've been preaching since day one, after an insider told me exactly what was going to happen, and that did. So it still hurts. So it's like kind of like someone spoiling Game of Thrones or the Avengers for you. I mean, someone's going to do that now because I've never seen the Avengers. But then you see something on Twitter and you're like, oh, that's ruined. But I'm still going to cry anyway when I watch it. That was what the Nick Foles thing was. But the Eagles waded through that so, I guess, unemotional. There was no attachment there. It was strictly business. They did what was best for both parties. They've done the same with Chris Long. It's mutually beneficial. They've extended a window. They've recently ended up releasing one of the undrafted free agents before it's confirmed, which is why I haven't actually reported on the undrafted haul just yet. I always wait until the team announce it because so much changes. The team is still going to wait 4 players before they can sign the undrafted guys and their draft class and whoever else. But the way they've carried themselves this offseason, the meticulousness of the draft, to be sat at 25, knowing that as the board is sliding, top 10 talents are coming down. It's falling perfectly if you're drafting by need, because you've got all those safeties, all those receivers, the entire running back board all looking at you. And you stick to your plan, you trust the process, you go up, and you select the heir to Jason Peters. This is a smart man, a smart front office. This smart football. If you compare it to, I would say the Giants, but I feel like you can compare how I was at the DIY store to the New York Giants, and somehow it would still be an improvement. But if you compare it to any other franchise in the league outside of New England, outside of Seattle, I'd argue Kansas City, but given how they have literally got me playing at cornerback with my 38.9-inch vert. What? Who said that? Huh? What? Didn't say a word. But their secondary is a mess. So I'm, again, not too sure. But there are very few teams that are as buttoned up now as the Eagles. And it's a long road to get there. It really is. If you look at what it was when Chip Kelly was ran out of town, and that Eagles locker room was fractured, and it was divided, and it was broken. And then they go out and sign a coach who has emotional intelligence. The world wanted Adam Gase. Jeffrey Lurie said the term emotional intelligence, got mocked on the radio for it. Apparently, I mean, I didn't hear it because I don't listen to Philly radio, unless it's the Art of the Take podcast, which you can listen to. That wasn't a sponsored endorsement, Spike, but if you're listening, do the same, and I'll I don't know, I'll buy you an Easter bunny chocolate, not an actual bunny. So there's that. You can tell I'm just not sleeping at the minute, can't you? But genuinely, to go from that much of a mess of a team, and within 3 years to not only win a Super Bowl, to find a franchise quarterback, to get back to the playoffs in the most adverse sense imaginable, to then go through another offseason where all you're doing is filling holes in... It's like the equivalent of, instead of paying the builders to come in and do a worse job because they don't care, just learn online, do it yourself, save some money, and use better materials. And that's sort of what Howie Roseman's done. Absolutely remarkable. You can't praise that job enough. And I want to do a video or an article or something looking back at this off-season, the moves that have been made, the order they happened, because it was reporting on it and running it for Philly Sports Network and doing the podcasts and YouTube and everything else. It really was an experience to see this all come together, and every week there'd be a different concern, and every week a different problem will be addressed until they get it down to just 2. And now I think there is only one concern over this team, and that is what happens at safety. And I really, really wouldn't put off the team going out of their way and signing a big name. Now, what free agents are left? It's not the healthiest pool in the world. The name I've been pounding the table for in these discussions has been Glover Quinn. That does not change now, especially given the circumstances. But then again, they've already gone and got Andrew Sendejo. So I feel like the team feel they've already filled that need. They don't need to go out and get another veteran. So there is no point having Rodney McLeod and then 2 more prove-it veterans if you're not going to groom up one of your younger guys. So you need to find out first which of those young DBs, if any, would move to safety. And I feel like that's when you'll find out. If you've got Avonte Maddox moving up there and balling out, fine. If it's Rasul Douglas, which I highly doubt, but I would probably get a bit flustered over if it did happen, fine. Whoever it is, they've got to work it out. If not, Andre Howe, Shallow Howe wants a gal. He's there, 27 years old, could be a nice fit. I've just handpicked a few names here that I feel like could fit this team. A lot of them are quite older. The big name that obviously stands out is Trey Boston. And that, for me, would be the dream signing. I've written an article on this before. Howie is the most overlooked safety at this point. It's ridiculous. I just don't understand how he's not ended up with the team. I still think, I've said this in a podcast before, it's borderline criminal that this guy ends up going from the Chargers, playing so damn well in 2017. So damn. He had 79 tackles in 2017. Earns himself the right to a big time deal. And then it doesn't happen. The market doesn't fall the way it wants. The safety position appears to be getting devalued, which is absurd because it's kind of relied on more than ever, I would argue. Don't get me started on this coverage versus pass rush debate. We're going to pretend that doesn't exist for a minute because analytics Twitter is a very weird place. But you expect the market to fall one way, it doesn't. He then signs a borderline cheap deal with the Cardinals. Like, it was, again, tiddlywinks for the lack of a better word. Goes out, posts another 79 tackles, has 3 quarterback hits, 9 passes defense. He's an absolute machine. And the same happens again. And he's 27 years old. And I can't quite work out, unless there are character concerns. That's the only thing. To go from Carolina to the Chargers to the Cardinals, there has to be something more. Because on the field, what you see is a machine. And the Eagles, I think, would happily snap him up to a slightly longer term deal. He earned $1 million with the Cardinals last year. 1 million. 1 million? I'm not doing that. And I also haven't done Andrew Sunday in a while either. But beggars can't be choosers. I've got to keep you on your toes. I do think that Trey Boston would be a good fit for this team. But I feel as though the Eagles want one of their younger DBs to move. I know that's not a shared opinion with many people. But we'll see. By the time OTAs and training camp and such roll around, all will come to fruition, I'm sure. But don't write it off. If the Eagles are going to sign a safety, do not write it off. I think Trey Boston should at least come for a workout. Just visit, say hello, have a cheesesteak. Come to England, have a cup of tea. Why not? But outside of that, there aren't many. I mean, Ibrahim Campbell, maybe, from Green Bay. There aren't many guys. There was an interesting candidate, actually, while we're really quickly on the topic. Blake Countess, who many of you will remember as a 6th round pick of the Eagles, caught on with the Rams, perennially a special teamer, been cut, could be in conjunction to return, you never know. I mean, it was the last of the Chip Kelly era, so you don't really expect wonderful things to happen there, but that could be a shout as a much cheaper option. But we're going to leave safeties there for a minute, and our vast appraisal of Howie Roseman, which could at this point just be 20 minutes of this. Hey, look at that! Liam's got him back again. Hang on, I can't hear the sound. Oh no. Oh, I've still got my computer muted. That's why. Let me try again and pretend that was smooth. That's why we got 20 minutes of this. Look at that! Big Howie! Big Howie and his big moves doing big things. Oh, and Liam the Joker. Classic LJ. Right, we're going to move on to your favourite part of the show. It's also my favourite part of the show. And boy, has it been lacking in recent weeks because it's been the draft. I've been so busy. Like, I'm doing this full time now. I'm running around like a fly that's just had its arse set on fire. I don't know where I'm at half the time. Like, I'm either writing or editing or making something or answering business emails. I've got to do that now. But with the draft, everything got a little bit hectic. So we're finally able to slow things down again, have a breath, and play a nice game of Thank You Next. Thank You Next at JLo Sucker says, what position group improves the most going into 2019? Now, I don't know if you mean in terms of on-field production or as in which has improved the off-season. So we'll go with the latter because it makes the question a bit easier to answer. I would say probably linebacker now. As of today, like, there is no linebacker or wide receiver or running back. It's not going well. I don't know. There are so many good options. Do you know what? No, I'm going to go wide receiver. No, I'm not. I'm staying at linebacker purely because I think LJ4 is criminally underrated. I think Zach Brown is criminally underrated. I love what we see from Nate Jerry and company as well. So improves the most moving forward. I think production-wise from linebackers, the Eagles aren't going to have to worry about durability. So, in terms of overall reliability, I would say linebacker. Flashiness, I think the fact that the team have brought back Deshaun Jackson, they've actually invested not just substantial salary, but now draft capital as well into wide receiver. That sets up the offense for an explosive year like no other. But I think the biggest beneficiaries of that will be the tight ends and the running backs. And as we know, I like Miles Sanders. I wouldn't rank that over the signing of Zay Brown, though. So there's a bizarre comparative take for you. So I hope that kind of answers your question. We're going to move on to the next question now. Thank you, next, Sean Lamont. Who will have more touchdowns this year, Miles Sanders or J-Jaw? Oh, that's tricky. That gets me right in the cranium. I gotta say, probably J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, because I feel like there's more you can do with him in the red zone. If you're down in the red zone, you want Jordan Howard to bulldoze his way through like an absolute tank slapper. I don't think Miles Sanders does that. He's a bit more elusive, a bit more zippy. Not to say he can't be used on the goal line, but I see him far more in year one as a screen, more kind of receiving option, someone they can put in the slot if need. Maybe even a change of pace guy. If you think of the slot share at the minute, or the snap share I should say, it's going to be an interesting diversion between Jordan Howard and Miles Sanders. So I'm going to say Arcega-Whiteside because I think the Eagles are going to use him more frequently in the red zone, which is of course the closest area to the end zone. And our final question comes from Geordie Fighter 14. Thank you, next. What do you think of Easton Stick going to the Chargers and not Philly? And do you think Carson Wentz will return and play good from his latest injuries? Easton Stick, I mean, that one broke my heart. I genuinely tweeted out, I was like, oh my god, the Eagles have traded up Easton Stick in the 7th round, here we come. And then within 35 seconds, that dream was shattered like my love life. So, Easton Stick, I mean, I think that would have been the perfect pick there. I was all for Brett Rippon or Easton Stick. I think Clayton Thorson is a bit more raw. However, Mike K made the point. I think Doug Peterson, well, he thinks, I agree with, Doug Peterson sees a bit of himself in Clayton Thorson, and I think that can only be a good thing for his development. So, in terms of Carson Wentz and his latest injuries, he'll be fine, I think. Everyone is massively overplaying it. He'll be absolutely fine. And let's say the average level of fine for Carson Wentz is excellent quarterback play. So you've got nothing to worry about, boys. Don't even sweat it in the slightest. But that's it for another edition. Not the episode, I'm not done yet, of Thank You Next. If you want to submit your questions, make sure you're following at Liam Jenkins 21. So that's my name, at the at sign, Liam Jenkins 21. Drop a question whenever through the week. Just let me know it's for Thank You Next. Or just wait till I put the sassy, poorly edited photos out and submit them that way as well. Actually, we are going to end the show on the biggest bombshell, because now, at approximately 45 seconds ago of this tweet, the Eagles have claimed Blake Countess. Now, I'm a bit shook, because if you remember, approximately 26 minutes ago, I said that could be a name to watch out for as special teams depth. And here we are, it's happened again. Liam records a podcast, and just before the podcast ends, whether it was Robert Kraft's indictment, whether it was a signing earlier on a few weeks ago, whether it was a trade up, it doesn't matter. There's always something that happens at the end of this show. I'm just an omen for average news, I suppose. So Blake Countess, the former Eagle, a 6th round pick, returns to Philadelphia, presumably to fight for a spot and be battling with Trey Sullivan. It'll be fun to watch during training camp. But that is it for another episode, because I've kind of now got to run and write an article on that. So if you've been new around here and you enjoyed the show, make sure you hit subscribe. If you're on Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star review. Let me know what you think. And if it's not 5 stars, that's okay, but try. It would mean a lot to me if you could. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen to this show. It really does mean a lot to me. It's not lost on how special and rare that is. Thank you for all of your support. The YouTube channel's now on 9,000 subscribers. I'm going to be away tomorrow watching the mighty Charlton Athletic play a football game. And not football, I mean soccer. Everyone that tells me to stick to soccer, have your weekend, and I hope you have a drink and this makes you very, very happy, because LJ will be in the stands talking about a round ball and not an egg one. But until Saturday afternoon when I return from said endeavour, enjoy your weekend, guys. Thank you so much once again. I'll see you soon.